Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today's date, it is December 16th of 2020. And, whoops, my 15th medicine I haven't taken yet. Um, so it's 12:01 a.m. That would make it, I think this is a Tuesday, right? No, it's a Wednesday, December 16th. Uh, I read these too many. I've got a friend too that does the same thing. We longtime friends, and we realized after a while that we were, is it quota, where people ask questions and then people answer the questions. I remember years ago. I remember the first thing that caught my attention, and I've mentioned that before, so I won't mention it again. But well, I will mention it again one of these days. But man, I start reading these things, and I just keep going to the next question, the next question, the next question, and I find it interesting. Now, these. I mean, you can't depend on the, the answer. I mean, somebody asks a question, you don't know if it's. I mean, sometimes you can, you tell, or from yourself or whatever. But I'm going to start. And I have answered two or three questions in all the years I've been reading these things. Two or three times there was a question that I thought, okay, I can give a good answer to that, and I did on two or three different occasions. Um, and then there's things that pop up that jog something in my memory, and so this is somebody asked a question, and the question, of course, sometimes a person asks a question and then somebody answers it totally, like. But somebody asks a question: have you ever walked into work only to realize that you were fired? And let me give you the answer this person gives. Uh, I was a Radio Shack manager until I chose a new employer. I gave a written resignation effective the end of my scheduled shift on June 23rd. The morning of the 23rd, I came to work just as I had for 21 years, 15 in this location. That's a long time to be a Radio Shack manager. I'm going to get into that. Uh, let's see. All seemed normal until a half hour after opening when I attempted to activate a cell phone for a customer. My password failed. I called my district office where the secretary told me I had resigned. I told her that perhaps she had not seen my notice or read it carefully. I had specifically said effective at the end of my shift to make it clear that if the company wanted an inventory count, that I would not stay late that night. She said despite that she had been told to use the 23rd as my first day as a non-employee. Since there was no other staff in the store, I closed the gate, mall store, slid my key under it, and walked away. It was clear that I was not going to be paid for the day. So I have a story along this line because I worked for Radio Shack for a short period of time. Um, so I was a Radio Shack customer, man, I mean, starting as a kid. And over the years, my God, I bought, the first computer that came out with, or the first computer really, basically you could buy, Radio Shack Model 1 with 4K of memory, 4K operating system. Then eventually they came out with a chip where you could upgrade it to, 16K of memory and 16K operating system. And then eventually I bought another device, not a Radio Shack device, where I upgraded the computer to 48K of memory. Anyway, I bought two Tandy 2000 computers. That was back when everybody was waiting for IBM, because IBM was a computer company, waiting for them to come out with a personal computer. But anyway, Radio Shack came out with a Tandy 2000, and then IBM came out with their PC, and the Tandy 2000 was pretty much compatible with, Radio Shack knew what was coming, and it was pretty much a clone of the PC, except better, the IBM PC. The Tandy 2000 came with a 10 meg hard drive. The floppy drive on the thing, and the floppies were the big ones, not the little ones. And because, IBM, their PC, I don't believe it had a hard drive in it. Maybe it did. I don't think so. But their floppy drive was the 360K. Just 360K of data you could put on your floppy drive. The Tandy 2000 had 720K. The screen was better on the Tandy 2000, so anyway, I ended up buying, two Tandy 2000s. The Radio Shack came out with a, looked like a tablet, but, it was a Model 100, a portable computer. And I bought one of those. I bought, I don't know how many scanners, radio scanners, and the Radio Shack came out with a ham radio, not a very good one. I mean, the ham radio, a handy talkie, not a very good one. I bought one of those. I don't know how many scanners I bought. The first scanners that I bought, you had to buy from Radio Shack, or you could go on someplace else and try to find the crystals, but they use crystals that you put in. I told the story where a 4-channel pocket or handheld one actually saved my life. The scanner did. I just bought everything from Radio Shack. So, Radio Shack, and I forget what the date was. Radio Shack, they had all these stores all over the United States. And then they opened up a computer store. My God, a computer store to sell Radio Shack computer stuff. Now, I knew that I did not want, I loved going into Radio Shack stores. And I bought a lot of stuff. Like I said, I can't, oh man. Probably if there was some way I could pull the data up or something, I probably would not want to know what I had purchased. How much it all came to. Telephone answering machines, just on and on. Anyway, they opened up a computer. Okay, I knew from going into all these stores and buying stuff and, talking a little bit to the managers and the people that work there, I knew I never wanted to work in a Radio Shack store. That was crap. The way everything that Radio Shack did, from their founding father, Tandy, which you could buy a book in the Radio Shack store telling his history and his philosophy, and his philosophy and the start of Radio Shack was hire people and screw your employees and don't pay them any money and make them buy stock in the Tandy Corporation. And those managers who did, if you want to be hired, you had to buy stock. And what little money you had, how much money are you going to, how much stock are you buying? I mean, it was just horrendous. And it was horrendous their entire life of the corporation. It was fuck the employees, Now, I don't know if I'm going to go into, so I never wanted to work for Radio Shack. I love their stuff. And I thought, I thought times, man, it'd be kind of nice to work in the Radio Shack store. All the scanners, all the computers, all this stuff would be there, that I could play with when I was, waiting on customers. But, so anyway, they came out with a computer store. Oh my God, Radio Shack computer store. So I went in to the newly opened computer store, and the manager of the computer store, and I said, I'd like to fill out an application. I filled out that, and then I was just talking to him like I'm talking to you, except hopefully a little more coherent. And as I was walking through I used to own, I still own one of those, and this guy said, oh my God, this is the manager of the computer store. He says, I want you to work here. You're gonna work here, but we have to run you through the general manager, and he's going to want to interview and everything. And I said, oh, okay. And so, nothing happened for a week or two or something. Then I get a call to drive out of, Kansas City, wherever I lived at the time, Kansas City, Missouri, to Overland Park or something like that. Went in, and the general, or I forget what they called him, general manager or district manager or whatever it was. He says, well, Mr. So-and-so says he wants you to work there at the computer store, but no, I've got a whole bunch of stores. I need managers for stores. And I said, well, not interested. I know, I've been a customer of Radio Shack. I've talked to a lot of managers, and I know that the managers get treated like shit. And I have no desire to be a manager at one of your stores. So, and he said, oh, we really need you, or we can, and this is, he's doing, and you can work up, if you were a backstage, yeah, you could work up and become a manager of a store, a district manager, and you could move up into make some money and stuff like that if you were ruthless and didn't care about your people, and you would do I knew all that stuff, and I said, not interested. And I lived, that's where I was living in Belton then, Belton, Missouri, small town, I don't know, 20,000 or something, right next to Grandview, which was a little bigger, Grandview, Missouri, which was, Kansas City was around, metropolitan area, Kansas City, Missouri was around them all, and stuff like that. So I was living in Belton, no Radio Shack store there. And I'd seen over at the Cedar Tree Square, a small strip mall, that's where the bank was, and the pharmacy and places like that. I'd seen a new building going up, and well, it wasn't a new building. It was one of the vacant places, but they put something up. I forget, a pole or something, and I thought that looks, like the kind of pole they put the revolving Radio Shack sign on or something. So anyway, this guy, this district manager said, well, I see you live in Belton. What if we were going to have a store, a store in Belton? Would you be willing to be manager there? And I said, is that the thing you're building at, Cedar Tree Square? He says, yeah, we're going to put a store there. He says, I can put you as a manager trainee at, a Radio Shack store, and when that store opens, gets ready to open, you'll be sent out there as the manager of that store in Belton. And I said, okay, I'll do it if I'm going to be the manager of the store when it, before it opens. And when it opens, I'll be the manager of that store. Okay. And he said, okay. So he says, at Bannister Mall, a big new shopping center is opening up there. And you're going to go be manager trainee there at the store. So I went to the Bannister Mall shopping center, brand new, and the manager there, he was new too, but I think he'd had some training someplace else. I'm sure he did. And So they were shipping stuff into us like crazy, and stuff we didn't order, and that gets into this whole thing. I'm not sure if I can get into all that or not, but maybe that's going to come up. I don't know. So anyway, I was made a trainee there. The manager was training me to be a manager at the he knew at the Belton store when it opened. So I was working with this guy, and by the way, I mean there right away you saw here this was a brand new store at a shopping mall, big shopping mall, and it was Christmas time, just before Christmas time, and Radio Shack was just normally the manager would order in because you had a budget. They decided how big of what area that you were in, whether it was a shopping mall. You had a budget to a certain amount of money. Now, if you bought, if you as manager, if you ordered in stuff and you got the wrong stuff in, you got a bunch of stuff in that didn't sell, you had a budget, and you couldn't order, anything else because your inventory was filled. They weren't going to send you anything else. Now, I mean, I didn't think it up, but you learn. But I learned. Okay, well, computers were just coming out. Well, they were stocking their computer stores with computers, but with all these thousands of Radio Shack stores, if they just sent one or two computers to a Radio Shack store, that'd be, I don't know how many stores they had. That'd be, I don't know, 5,000 computers, were sent to these stores that were, there. So they wouldn't send you any, we were a mall store and we wouldn't, but they were sending us Christmas toys that we didn't order. Most of which didn't work, the wind up ones, the battery operated ones and all this kind of stuff. Junk, crash. I mean, it was just showed up, junk. And we didn't order it. And it was, of course, it filled out of it. But I made up, two names and said we needed, two computers. They were sold, and they, of course, shipped them to us. As soon as they, and I intended to set one up. I had a bulletin board system, at home, and I had a Radio Shack computer, by the way, the first ones that came out. So anyway, it would be delivered. I'd be opening the box up, going to set it up, hook it up so people could actually sit down, and people would come in, Radio Shack computer, I'll buy it, and they would buy it. And they'd buy the other one, they'd buy, and I'd try to order in, and they'd send them in, and I just couldn't, I mean, eventually I got one set up, and people could come in, and then I could say, hey, But, so anyway, so we're working, they're dropping all this crap on us. And also the mall, of course, opens early and it closes late, and they add extra time because of Christmas at the mall. All the stores have to abide by the mall rules of opening and closing. You can't close early. You'll be fined. So whenever a Radio Shack store gets a new manager, they have to do inventory at night after the store closes. And the manager, or whoever the employees that work there, but then also a few people are sent from other stores to do the inventory. And maybe you'd get it done at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning or something, counting everything and doing all this kind of stuff. So here, the manager and myself, we had this new store opening at a mall. We had to open it early. We had to stay open late. They were delivering stuff to us that, and we get a call from like the general manager more than once. Me and the manager or whatever, report at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or whatever it is, or 10 p.m. out to Prairie Village, Kansas, or Mission, Kansas, or whatever. You're going to be doing inventory there. And we had to do it, or else. Because even the manager said, district manager, that we just got in X amount of, no, you've got to be there. So we're doing that, and I'm thinking, oh, crap. But I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be the manager of my store, in Belton, Missouri, and the construction's going on. So anyway, I'm working at the mall store, and a guy comes in, and the manager, of the store there, he goes over to him, and it's like, buddy, and everything, and, looking at me, and maybe kind of pointed, and everything. And then the manager brings over this guy, and he says, "Oh, Jim, this is so and so, and he's manager at the Lee Summit Radio Shack store." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then he says, the guy that came in, he says, "When you're done with your training here, what store are they going to give you?" And I said, "The Belton store." And the guy looked funny, and everything. And I forget that we talked a little bit, and he left. The manager walked him to the, Then the manager came over, and I said, "He's manager at the Lee Summit store?" "Yeah." I said, "You know how long he's been?" "Yeah, he's been, X number of, time at the store." I said, "Do you happen to know where he lives?" And the manager smiled and says, "Belton." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm sure he probably wants that store." I don't remember if the manager said he did. I said, "I'm sure he probably wants that store, the Belton store." And I said, he's already a manager. I said, he deserves it. But if I don't get the Belton store, I'm going to quit. And so then, I don't know, a few days later, a week later, whatever, I'm driving back from the Bannister Mall store, and as we're driving down 71 Highway, I see you can't see the Radio Shack, revolving sign, or was it revolving? I don't know, but up on the top of the pole. As you're driving down the highway, you can't see the thing. It's too low, a few feet too low. You can't see it. Maybe as you get up to the intersection where you should have taken the exit to go to Belton, Missouri, maybe if you look over, then you could see it then back there, but you couldn't see it as you're driving down. You should be driving down the highway. Hey, a Radio Shack store. So the next day, whatever, I called the general manager, and I said, "Oh, by the way, that sign, you can't see it as you're driving down 71 Highway on the store, Belton store." And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Just thought you might like to know." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." And I knew, okay, this is it. And then I get I'm not sure if the general manager or if the manager told me at the store, or if I think I probably got a call. "I need you to come out to Overland Park," or wherever it was, to see the district manager again. So I drive out there, and he said, "Here's a test for you to take." And I thought, oh, God, because I really didn't think I was that, because the managers really, the ones I ran into, even the guy, they didn't have any kind of a playbook, or it appeared, or anything where like they check you off on everything. I had to ask questions and stuff and everything. I thought, this isn't going to be good. I'm thinking I'll flunk it, and then he'll say, "Well, I can't put you as a manager at the new store," or whatever. So I filled out everything on the thing, and then he asked a couple questions, and luckily, like one question was, "Okay, look at this spreadsheet," or whatever. He says, "Look at that." And he says, "What do you notice about that?" And looked at it, and I said, "Well, the returns, that number is way too high for the number of returns," which was correct, And he said, "Yeah." So he says, "Well," he says, "I'd like to put you at another store." And I said, "No, we had a deal, He said, "Well, there's somebody who is a manager now." And I said, "Yeah, I met him I said, seemed like a nice guy." And I said, I'm sure he's entitled to, he lives in Belton. I know he lives in Belton. I'm sure he wants the store. He's entitled to the store. But our agreement was I got the Belton store. If I'm not going to be then I'm just going to quit. And he said, but he says, well, I haven't made up my mind yet what I'm going to do. And I said, well, when you make up your mind, I'll make up my mind. And he said, I'd like to put you at the Grandview store, which was a little hole in the wall Radio Shack store that had been there a long time, which was not far from the Bannister Mall store, but the Bannister Mall, But everybody knew where this Grandview store was. I had been there many, many times and purchased everything. And he said, I want to put you there as assistant manager. And he says, there's only a couple stores of all of our stores where the manager gets a commission, and employees can make, it was a system set up to screw employees, but you also, it was very, he says, and it was true, there's only a couple stores in the entire district that make enough money that the manager of the store gets profits or percentage or whatever. And same with the salesman. If you work at one of those stores and you had to make a certain, because your salary was a certain amount, you had to sell a certain amount. But if you sold more than that, then at those stores you would make some money. And I said, well, I want the Belton store, but I said, if you want to put me at the Grandview store temporarily for training purposes, whatever, fine. But when he says, fine, okay, good. He says, I think you'll like that store. You can make money there. So I was sent over to that store. Now, the guy who was the manager there was somebody who worked for Radio Shack a lot, all across the United States. I think he was more like a gypsy or something, And he didn't really teach me anything unless I just happened to see it, because he was running around to the other stores talking to the managers and maybe picking up something, and then they would write it off and he would have it back at his store, whatever. I opened the store, I closed the store. I never hardly ever saw this manager of the store. He was always wheeling and dealing. And but anyway, it was possible at that store. And also the reason for that was like it was almost impossible for the Bannister Mall store to ever make any money, because they were paying for a mall place with the rent, all that kind of stuff. This little Grandview store was a hole in the wall place. It was small, but everybody knew it was there because they'd been there for years, and that's where, if they thought of, I need a cable, or I need batteries, or you'd know where to go to the Radio Shack store, And so I was opening the place, closing the place, working all the time there, and learning a little bit, because stuff that I hadn't really been taught, and I'm not sure the other managers, the manager there at that store, who I never saw, he'd just pop in occasionally. He, things like somebody returns an item, that they had purchased at another store, at our store. He knew how to, the manager knew how to enter it in, so it was charged back to that store that had actually, Radio Shack store that actually sold it. All kinds of things like this, and I thought, my God, this is stuff somebody needs to know, I mean, but I thought it was all a little bit also like unscrupulous. I mean, a little shady the way he did everything. But so anyway, it was getting closer for time for the Grandview store to open, and the manager at where I worked at the mall, he talked to me a few times on the telephone, like, have you heard anything about the Grandview store? Are you still going to get it or whatever? And I said, I don't know. I said, that I'd either I got it or I would quit. And then anyway, he called and he says, Jim, the manager from the, the mall store, Jim, I hear so-and-so's on his way out for the guy from Lee Summit. They sent somebody to take over the Lee Summit store, and he's heading to the, Belton store to open it up today or whatever. So, so I was at the, the Grandview store. So I called the district manager and I said, I understand that so-and-so is on the way to open up the Belton Radio Shack. And he says, yeah, that's right. And I said, so I'm not going to be the manager there. And he says, nope, so-and-so is. And I said, okay, well, I'll work the rest of today and tomorrow. And then, I quit. And he said, no reason to do that. He says, I've got somebody on the way to replace you right now. And I said, okay. So anyway, this young guy shows up. And of course, my manager wasn't there. I was the only one there at the store. So he shows up. And I said, hi. And I said, this is a nice, I said, this is a nice store. You actually make a little bit of money because, and I explained, the thing about, I think he may have already known. He was a young guy, but I think he maybe he'd been a manager or I don't know, probably a trainee. Anyway, nice guy. And I said, the manager here is not here, but he should be back pretty quick. I said, he does a lot of running around. And we talked a little bit. I didn't tell him any bad stuff. I didn't tell him I was quitting or anything, I don't think. And so then the manager for that store shows up, and he already knew, I think he already knew. So the manager, we didn't have cell phones then, but you had pagers, So he comes and I said, there's a new guy here who's going to take my spot here. And I said, this will be my last day. I told him, I said, this will be my last day. Because the manager, I called the manager, and the manager said, that I told him I'd stay today and tomorrow. And the manager said, never mind, there's a replacement coming to replace you today. And I said, that, he's there. So I said, I'll be leaving when you get done, talking to him or whatever. I'll stick around while you explain things to him. So they go in the back room, and then I heard, I couldn't hear the manager, but I could hear this guy saying, well, when in the fuck do you work? And I couldn't hear their. Well, I don't care what Jim Howard does. You mean Jim Howard opens in the morning and he closes at night? I'm not doing that. You think I'm crazy? I'm just hearing this, and everything. And so then this guy comes out and says, nice meeting you, Jim, or something. I can't remember. It's been a long time, but nice meeting you, Jim, or whatever. And he left. And then the manager came out and said he quit. And I said, well, I can't remember. I think I said I'd stay the next day, Maybe not, because the manager called and said you're replaced. And I can't remember now if I stayed or if I said, okay, well, I'm leaving. Good luck, and left. I can't remember. But that's the way their system operated. Now, people moved up, and you could make, as whatever manager, I don't know what levels of managers they had, district manager, blah, 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 blah. I don't know how it worked. But now eventually what they did, like that Grandview store, it had been there for years and years. They eventually closed it, and I think they opened someplace else at not a Bannister, gigantic shopping center, but opened it someplace where the rent was high. That's how the whole thing worked. Like, you had, depending on the size of your store, I don't know how they have people, figuring this crap out, what your inventory was for your store. But rent, the batteries, Radio Shack, you get free batteries, with a card, and you get free batteries, all that stuff was, charged to the store. And when the manager and they're giving you the batteries for free, that less money that the store makes, and so it ended up that these stores really, they were selling stuff, and Radio Shack, they had trucks that delivered, the Radio Shack trucks delivered supplies to you. Well, the trucks that delivered the supplies to the stores, they charged the stores for, Radio Shack trucks. They delivered stuff from the Radio Shack warehouse. When they shipped something to you, you had to pay for that. You paid for that. When the truck delivered it to you, the Radio Shack truck delivered it to you, you paid for that. When you gave somebody free batteries, you paid for that. You paid for all that stuff. But now, if you could move up by screwing people, I would have never wanted to be. I would never want to be something like. But I could never have been a district manager and just get people to work that you knew were going to get screwed and you knew they weren't going to. And then making somebody, work their store, and then they have to show up and inventory some store all night long, and then open. And two, what for that mall store, and I'm sure they did that at all the stores. Radio Shack had this crap, little robots and that kind of thing. We'd set them outside the door at the mall, and everybody would, people were going to open that crap up for their kids, hey, the robot, and the robot's not going to work, and it gets returned. And two, that they were shipping stuff to this brand new store at a mall, and they were the ones who were deciding, what crap we needed, and then we couldn't order stuff because we had, I don't know how many, robots and crap that was, so. So anyway, that was my end of my time working for Radio Shack. What else do I want to? But I thought that was really interesting. That guy shows up to replace me and goes back there, and then I hear him telling the manager, when do you work here? I don't care what Jim Howard, you mean he works in the morning and then he closes 2 at night? And then he said, to hell with it, and he left. I hope that I went ahead and just fucking left that day, because I told the manager, the district manager, when he called, I told the district manager, well, when this guy, okay, he says, I got somebody on the way to replace you. And I said, okay, when he gets here, I'll leave. So that's my story, I guess, with radio. I think I told you everything about Radio Shack. Now, I got fired another time. I knew I could have not been fired. I wanted to be fired. I'll tell you about that story. I was working hospital security. I'd done 4 grievances. I won every time because the director of security was like Donald Trump. I didn't realize it. Didn't realize it until people were talking about Donald Trump. And here's the things that he has and his problems or whatever. And I thought, oh my God, the guy I worked for back in the 80s or whatever, I couldn't understand why the guy lied about everything and why he did. That was it. I was dealing with somebody that, and I didn't realize it till. But I did 4 grievances at that store because the director of security I kind of liked him. I've mentioned this before. He gave me fantastic merit reviews. He put into my merit reviews that when his position became available, of course, he thought he was going to move on to be a hospital administrator. And he would tell me that, he had the name tag actually made up. He never made administrator, he never would have. But it just got where I couldn't stand him anymore. And it was all designed, it was all set up. the director of security had it set up, the director of human resources, personnel, it was all set up that they had a biomed department. And it was all set up that I was to, as soon as there was an opening in the biomed department, I would be moving over into the biomed department. The guy who ran the biomed department had, interviewed me. I didn't have a degree in electronics or anything like that, but I knew a lot about computers. And when I interviewed the guy, he asked me questions, that kind of stuff. The guy that was in charge of the biomed, real nice guy. And I said, I don't have a degree in electronics. Electronic technicians, or I'm nothing like that. And he says, Jim, you know all about these computers and everything. He says, that's what we need right now. And then he explained what, and for the first time in my life, I was a little bit afraid of, because I knew a little bit about I built Heathkit radios, and I was an amateur radio operator, and but I still did not, but he explained what they wanted me to do. Everything, the beds, switches, equipment, everything was going to be put onto a inventory sheet or spreadsheet or something like that. And then those things had to be, once a month or once a year or what, all this stuff had to be checked and a little thing put on it, and that kind of stuff. But I was a little bit, for the first time in my life, when I was a welder, when I worked for the post office, all these other jobs, I always thought, I can do this, But for that job, I thought, oh my God, I hope I don't get in there. But it was all set that and there was 3 or 4 of the guys in the biomed department were looking to go someplace else where they could make more money. But I was on a committee there at Trinity Lutheran Hospital that we were reviewing salaries. Now, of course, we didn't review, I was the only security officer on this one committee. I didn't get to evaluate a security officer, and nobody there was able to evaluate their own thing, but we, this is a food service employee, it wasn't an individual, it was a position. Food service employee, and then we checked things okay, well, they work where it's hot. There's, water and all those kind. There were things and for biomed, some of these things were okay, if this person, whoever they were, in the biomed department, I got to evaluate, the committee got to evaluate the biomed, that committee. What if they make a mistake? And it was oh shit. They make a mistake, somebody gets shot, they make a mistake, and the thing stops functioning. This is a, $100,000 piece of equipment. If they mess up on that, whatever, So I thought, wow, these people they already knew they were, but, so that was where I was set up to go, but I couldn't make it. I kept, every morning the director of the biomed department would come and pick up his keys to his department. And I'd say, any openings yet? And he says, Jim, just hang on. I said, I can't take it much longer. I cannot stand it much longer. Hurry up, please. He said, just hang on. And I couldn't. So anyway, I knew the hospital had declared Boss Appreciation Day, put a notice out to all the employees on such and such a day, Friday, such and such a date. That's Boss Appreciation Day. Do something nice for your boss. Give him a card, make a cake, have a party, do, whatever. And so that was coming, that was coming up. And so I was supervisor at that time of the day shift. And 2 of the officers on the day shift, oh, we need to do something for Mr. Ross, and I said, I don't think it's a good idea. Well, we want to, and I said, well, if you want to, okay, but I think it's a bad idea. And, one was a female security officer, real nice lady, by the way, couldn't do reports she had trouble. I even tried to teach her. She just couldn't do reports. She was smart, though, but she just couldn't do reports, but we worked, took care of that. and the other was a gay employee. Nobody knew, well, I'm sure some people knew he was gay, but he was a gay security officer. He'd been a hospital orderly and stuff like that at the hospital for years, and everybody loved him, you know. And so, of course, those two out of the security officers wanted to, you know. So, anyway, the second shift comes in that day because I was working. We were working day shift. Second shift comes in. Of course, they were a bunch of assholes. I fired one of them, but I told you about that for racial prejudice or whatever. Anyway, they come in. You guys, you suck asses. Whatever, throwing a party for Mr. Ross. Fuck that asshole. God damn. Of course, they would never say that to his face. I mean, or, you know, or do anything to his face, you know. But fuck him. We're not going to take part in no party or whatever. Okay, well, you don't have to take part in the party, you know. So then I go home. The next morning, of course, I'm working day shift. I come in, and the midnight shift is there, you know, getting ready to go home. You fucking suck ass is going to do something. To hell with Mr. Ross, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, can't remember her name, Richard, the security officer on the day shift, the gay guy, and whatever her name was, I was talking to them and I said, and they heard it, I mean, they knew. I said, I guess you heard the midnight shift saying, you know, they didn't want any part of it and to hell with the boss, you know, that kind of stuff. I'm sure you heard the second shift when they were coming on duty, you know, and we were getting ready to go home and they were saying the same thing. And I said, I really think it's a bad idea. And they said, well, okay, yeah, you're right. It's a bad idea. We're not gonna do that. And I said, I think that's best. And then I think later in the day or something or other, I guess they got together, you know. No, we want to go ahead and we're going to have a party for Mr. Ross. And I said, okay. So I wrote him up. And in the write-up, I put, you know, Boss Appreciation Day or whatever. They were causing this, I forget how I put it nice, you know. They saw that the third shift was not cooperating and not happy. The second shift was not cooperating and happy and was not happy with it. And by doing this, all they were doing is really creating dissension within the department when it would have been much better just to, you know, give the guy a card or something and, you know, forget about the whole thing. But they had to, you know. And I said, I'm not calling for any disciplinary action. I'm just letting them know that in the future, please don't do anything that causes dissension within the department. But no disciplinary action is, you know, called for against Richard, and I remember his last name, but Richard and whatever her name was. And so then I took these to Mr. Ross's office and put them in his tray. And I didn't actually have to do that. I mean, the write-up. I mean, I was at the point, the hospital had me doing the interview, you know, the interviewing and basically the hiring, except I would always ask Mr. Ross, you know, is this, or can I get some extra money for this? You know, because the hospital knew it, or at least the head of human resources knew. Oh my God, you know. So I guess I'm telling you two stories. This is, so I put it in Mr. Ross's tray for him to initial it or sign it or whatever. And he was at the party. And he was so happy. And so I just happened to be on the elevator. I got on the elevator and he's coming back from the party. Of course, I didn't go to the party. And I said, oh, there's a couple of write-ups in your tray in your office. And he liked that. You know, oh, okay, you know. And then he read, of course, then I just happened to be on the elevator again. Our security office was on the 6th floor. I just happened to get on the elevator. There was Mr. Ross and he had his clipboard. I knew he was heading for administration. And I knew, and that was a Friday because we had our departmental meeting. And So I could tell he didn't say anything to me. I could tell he was hot, you know. And so anyway, then it's time for all the other shifts come in for our departmental meeting. And I'm in there, and he comes in, and then he says to the entire department, 15, you know, let me tell you, I'm not going to allow any backstabbing in this department. And the person that's doing the backstabbing in this department, that's going to be the end of him. That's going to be it with him. And, you know, of course, he didn't mention my name. Of course, everybody knew. And so then we get a call on the radio. All the security officers, I didn't approve of him doing it that way. When we had our departmental meeting every 2 or 3 months, he would have all of us go. And I always said, you know, let's keep one officer on, you know, no, we all have to be there for this training. And so he could tell us, he would spend the entire time basically telling us how great he was and what all the things he was going to do, which he never did, you know, that I'm going to get administration to have, you know, doors automatically open by our, you know, ID tag. And I thought, the hospital's not going to spend the money enough. But anyway, we got a call. There's a fire outside of the administrative office on the ground floor. And normally Mr. Ross, I mean, he did, you know, like a call would come in and he would start running down the hall. He had a bad leg. He'd be limping down the hall. He would just overreact to everything, and especially anything having to do with administration. You know, if an administrator on the ground floor would look out and there's a parking lot there, if they would pick up, you know, they'd call his office, Mr. Ross, seems like there's a lot of traffic out there or whatever. And then he'd be out, Mr. Ross, administration just called, somebody check, you know, and for something like that, a fire outside of. And I said, I guess I'll take care of that, you know, and so I left. Nobody else left. I went down outside the window there. There was wood had been put there on top of gravel or something. And somebody had thrown a cigarette in. There was a little bit of smoke coming out, and I put it out. And then I went back up and went in. Got real quiet when I went in. And I went in and I said, well, I just saved the hospital from burning down, you know, jokingly, like, you know. And so anyway, I knew it was Friday, so I knew Monday morning that I'd be fired. I also knew that all I had to do was just go over to administration. Especially, I'd never gone to like the main administrator. I always dealt with the guy who was Mr. Ross's best buddy and his supervisor, you know, assistant administrator. I knew that all I had to do, because actually there had just been my fourth grievance. My third grievance, I'd gone to the hospital assistant administrator. He said he would take care of everything. There'd be no more problems, Jim, and you know, whatever. And then there was problems, you know, and I presented everything. And the hospital assistant administrator knew, because he told me, oh yeah, I did hear about that when Mr. Ross did this and that. But so anyway, and I'd done the fourth on the fourth grievance that I did, the hospital assistant administrator was required to go to the human resources office with me and with the hospital human resources director there. And I'd seen that before, that situation before, where the director of security had to be there with the hospital human resources there, and where the blood veins were popping out on the hospital because the hospital administrator or whatever had ordered, you know, the assistant in that case. And I could, you know, and like the hospital, so the administrator of the hospital had ordered the assistant administrator of the hospital, which I don't think anybody had ever seen before in that situation, to meet in the human resources department and resolve which they did, resolve my problem, you know. But I'd never seen the hospital assistant administrator. He'd always been nice, jokingly and everything with me. He'd always been nice. Like whenever the hospital director of security was sick on a vacation or whatever, he always, hospital, the director of security always put me in charge, which caused problems with the other two supervisors, because why did he put me in charge, And then I told Mr. Ross, anyway, that's another entire story. But anyway, so the hospital assistant administrator was not happy. His boss had ordered him to be there with the human resources director and me, and that things were to be taken care of. And then I remember the hospital assistant administrator saying, Jim, when you came to me with that grievance, he says, I told him, Mr. Ross, I told him he could never, ever yell at an employee. He could never do this and do that. And he said, has he? And I was honest. I said, no, he hasn't. He'd been doing any yelling. He was still doing shit, I didn't mention, to him. I could have said, yes, you also told me that Mr. Huber, no, it wasn't Huber. Huber was at the other hospital. I said, you also told me that you would not allow any retaliation against me at all. And I said, immediately, I just happened to go through our daily activity sheets, which were filed away, and we almost never ever had to go through them. They were, we all filled out an activity sheet every day, and the secretary went through it and counted up the number of stuff that we did, what we did, typed it up, and it went to the assistant administrator to show how many doors we found unlocked, all this kind of stuff. But other than that, we never looked at it. I just happened to go through and have to find something, and wait a minute, there's my activity sheet. And Mr. Ross had written on there, circled it or something or other. Goes against hospital policy. I flipped through. This is not in approval, and all of those things were perfectly okay that I did. And he had never ever on any activity sheet for the 5.5 years that I had worked there, he had never written on anybody's activity sheet, or he probably even looked at anybody's activity sheet, really. He looked at the incident reports, I know, because he went freaking nuts over those. So anyway, I didn't say, yeah, well, he did, because so anyway, I knew I was going to be fired, but I knew too that I actually knew that I knew I was going to be fired. But I also knew because I knew it shouldn't happen. But what happened? I had an idea that what was going to happen was I was going to be called to go up to the security office, or to go to human resources, or maybe even to the assistant administrator's office, and in order to make sure that Mr. Ross didn't fire me, because they had to have somebody with him, because he would just do whatever he wanted to do when he was told not to. And so I got a call. I stayed down in the parking garage area I was supervisor for 7 parking lot attendants too. And a couple of them, Jim, what's going on? I said, nothing. And I said, yeah, something's going on. I said, I'm getting fired here in a few minutes. I want to get a call. No. I said, yep. No. I said, yep, I'm getting fired here in a few minutes. I already had paperwork in my car to go to the federal government over in Kansas City, Kansas. I had a change of clothes in the car because I didn't want to be in a uniform. And I had the paperwork that I'd been keeping for years. Things Mr. Ross had said in front of people. All kinds of shit. So anyway, I got a call to come to the security office. I went up, walked in, hospital assistant administrator wasn't there, and the guy from human resources wasn't there. It was just Mr. Ross and the lieutenant. And Mr. Ross says, you're fired. And I said, okay. I turned around, walked on out, turned in my stuff. I had bought a whole bunch of, I had bought a whole bunch of, from Thomas Publishing Company, a whole bunch of books on police science and all that kind of stuff. And the lieutenant said, Jim, you want your books? And I said, nope, leave them for the guys. That's why, I bought them, I read them, and then I put them there at the hospital for of course, the guys that were taking them home and not bringing them back. Like, the secretary said, Jim, should I start a thing like a card index? And I said, if you want to try it, but it won't work. They all took them home. But anyway, what was left, maybe half of what I had purchased. Anyway, I left and changed clothes and went over to the federal, whatever it was, and sat down to talk to the lawyer. And it was early in the morning. And man, the lawyer just kept asking questions, and I had all the documentation, things that Mr. Ross had said, things you're not allowed to say. Anyway, I immediately got a job. That was a Radio Shack job, I think. And I decided I didn't want to have anything to do with hospital security. And I had a job, but I also, filed with the Missouri Unemployment Office that I had been unfairly fired. So they had a hearing. I already had a job though, but I went down for the hearing, and the arbitrator was there, federal government arbitrator, and I was there, and nobody showed up. And the guy said, is the hospital sending somebody? And I said, I don't think they send anybody for anything like this. And he said, okay, well, I guess. And I said, wait a minute. There's the hospital human resources guy coming. So he came down, and we sat down at the thing. I knew immediately I had won, I knew I was going to win because I also had all of my merit reviews. And my first 6-month merit review was, most you could get was 7%. I got 6.5%. And I mean, that was I couldn't believe it. I didn't know, I was just doing my job, been there 6 months. Very rarely saw that I'd see a director of security pulled in or something. But I just knew what needed to be done. I'd already worked hospital security at another hospital. But I got called up for my merit review, and Mr. Ross slid it across. Wow. And I'm thinking, this guy really likes me. He really appreciates me. And I thought, I like this. I didn't say anything, I said, thank you, and I signed it. And then as I was leaving, he says, Jim, do you like it? And I said, yes, I like it a lot. Thank you very much. And left. Then after that, every merit review that I got was 7%. And everything in there, he put in there was stuff that I loved. And I got one of the merit reviews just before I got fired, Just before he fired me, he had wrote the merit review that I was qualified to take his position, but that I was going to be moving into the biomed department and blah, 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 blah. And everything was all, and so all that paperwork I had, so anyway, the Missouri State arbitrator said to the hospital human resources, Mr. Johnson, why was he fired? Why was Jim Howard fired? And I couldn't believe that the hospital human resources said that. He objected to a party being thrown for the department director. The hospital had declared such and such a day, Boss Appreciation Day, and Jim objected to that. And the arbitrator went, what? What did you just say? And he said, and Mr. Johnson was the human, he was a great guy. He was a nice guy, smart and everything else. So he repeated it. And I knew, of course I'd figured anyway, the arbitrator, did the hospital request people to make donations or to buy something, or, and then the human resources guy was like, well, yeah, but the hospital administration declared it boss appreciation, and I knew I'd won. And so then we just went through it was kind of interesting, the way the rules were for some reason. Mr. Johnson, the human resources guy, was sworn in. This guy swore him in. Everything you say, the truth, so help you God, whatever. I wasn't, but it wouldn't matter. I wouldn't have lied. And then I got to ask him. I wish I had video of that for YouTube. You guys probably wouldn't care, but oh man, I'd watched too much of. What was the guy in the wheelchair and stuff? The lawyer. I want to say Clarence Darrow, but that wasn't. Anyway, goes, Mr. Johnson, did I ever fail to perform any of my duties? No, Jim, you always did your duty. Did I ever fail to require the subordinates to do, to do their duty? No, Jim, I was just boom, 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 boom. And of course I knew I won, so I won, but it didn't matter, I got a paper saying that I was unfairly discharged from the hospital, but I decided that was the end of hospital security for me. I was so glad. Now, but sometimes over the years I thought, man, it would have been nice to be in the biomed department. Eventually that hospital closed. Eventually I ended up working at the next hospital that I worked at after many, many years. That hospital, Research Medical Center, set up Health Midwest, a non-profit corporation or something. And then they took over like 11 hospitals in Kansas City, Missouri. There was hardly anything left that they didn't own, and one of them was Trinity Lutheran Hospital where I worked. I actually got sent, our director of security called me in and, Jim, Bob Ross, the director of security, what can you tell me about him? And I said, smart man. He doesn't know how to handle rank and file people. He's not good at handling, but if you need somebody for having to do with fire protection or OSHA regulations, I said you can use him in that capacity. He is fantastic. But so far as dealing with somebody, he can't handle that and do that. I got sent over there to work a few days, as not as a supervisor or anything. They just needed somebody for the, I think, 4th of July celebration or something. I was over there working where I'd been fired, By the way, the assistant administrator. Now this, I always tell you the truth. The assistant administrator at Trinity Lutheran Hospital. I called, I think, somebody that I knew at Trinity once or twice. And after, I worked there for 5.5 years. And once or twice, right after I got fired, I called over there. One reason I called over there was, as soon as I got fired also and I went home, Trinity had just hired in a new director of nursing who was from the military. She was an officer or whatever, and a hospital administrator, and or maybe not a hospital, maybe just director of nursing. And she came in and she said, okay, LPNs can no longer be in charge of a unit. It has to be an RN. All nurses have to go back to wearing their hats, which nurses hated. When you graduate from nursing school or whatever, they all have a weird hat or whatever, with wings on it or I don't know what. None of the nurses ever wanted to wear those things. And they were so happy for years they didn't have to. She came and anyway, she didn't last very long. She ended up working at Research Medical Center where I was working. But anyway, they did some other things too. They put a freeze, they changed the amount of pay that people were getting paid at Trinity Lutheran Hospital. They didn't give you a reduction of pay, you just couldn't get as much. So anyway, I called the Service Employees International Union in Kansas City, Missouri, and I said, my name and everything, and I said, I was working at Trinity Lutheran Hospital as a security officer. I got fired, and I've been a union member, a large part of my life, and I said, of course I wasn't when I was working there, but I'm always sympathetic to you people. And I said, this would be a good time, because they were over there once or twice during my time there where they were handing out, the union was handing out literature, you know. Of course, we made sure, security made sure they didn't go inside the hospital or, you know, all that kind of stuff. Administration and the director of security went crazy, you know, the union is there. It just drove them crazy. Make sure nobody comes in. Make sure they don't leave a leaflet in the hospital. Make sure report any employee that indicates any favoritism to unions or anything. You know, I mean, it was just, they went crazy. I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the things they. So anyway, I called the Service Employees International Union, and I said, I said, hey, they hired in this lady, you know, as a director of nursing, and she wants me to go back to wearing their hats. She wants to blah, 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 and I just listed all the things. And I said, be a good time to go over and hand out some literature. And I called a couple of days later. You know, talked to a security officer, the gay security officer. Not that I'm gay or there's anything wrong with it. And I called him up. Richard, how's everything going? Oh, Jim, you're so lucky. He didn't say you're so lucky. You're so lucky that you got fired and I got your job, you know. He said, oh, man, it is so terrible. But you know how the hospital is about unions. The union has been here, the Service Employees International Union, handing out literature, and administration is going crazy. It's just terrible. I said, oh, I sent them. And he, oh, yeah. Yeah, I said, no, I sent them. I called him. I told him, oh, Jim, you're so funny. I said, okay, never mind. Anyway, I called another person, I think. Might have been Richard. Can't remember. I called for some other reason. That's the only 2 times I ever called. Except years and years and years later, I was working at another hospital, and it was rare for the Trinity Lutheran Hospital to get a helicopter to land, because they had to land at the Liberty Memorial Mall. I had to have an ambulance there a few blocks away, and then the ambulance had to take the person from the helicopter, drive them down the hill to the, you know, and to Trinity, you know. So anyway, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. We were sending somebody from our little tiny hospital to Trinity Lutheran Hospital. So I called down, and for the first time in years talked to. But that's not where the other thing, I said, hey, we're sending a patient down here, you know. So to get them ready so they could be ready. But anyway, right after I was fired from Trinity, I called down for some other reason. Or maybe it was that same phone call. I don't think so. I was told that the assistant administrator, one in charge of security, was fired. Now that I do not I would believe it. I mean, it would make sense, because he had just been ordered to, you know, to go to Human Resources and meet with me and the Human Resources director, and I knew he was pissed, you know, and I'd never seen him pissed before. And I knew that's how they did things, you know, like somebody had to be there so the hospital administrator could get you know, also know what happened, you know. And so I think our assistant hospital administrator was fired, and I feel sorry for the guy, because I actually think he was. But he had a buddy, the director of security, and I mean, doing your job comes first. I mean, I did my job, and he didn't do his job. Let me give you one example of the director of security there at Trinity, Mr. Ross. I was going through the hospital, making my rounds, going through the lobby, and all of a sudden, on the public address system, I heard the voice of the director of security, not the switchboard operator, who would normally would be the one who made all the announcements, you know. Code Gray, Dr. Red, or whatever it was, all this kind of stuff, Never heard the director of security. And I knew, oh shit. And so then, okay, and the sun, by the way, the sun was shining, not a cloud in the sky. Now, this is hard to believe. And then it's the director, okay, have an announcement. There is a snowstorm coming, a very bad snowstorm. It's going to be ice and whatever. So we are putting into effect Section 12 of Article 13 of such and such, which calls for blah, blah, blah. However, disregard paragraph 9 of Section 3 of, and I'm walking through the lobby, and the department head for admitting had her book, the disaster manual, flipping through. Disregard this. Anyway, Mr. Ross was the director of security and safety. Smart man, except not being able to deal with people and having the same affliction, I guess, as my buddy Donald Trump. They called him into administration. Administration was there, that's why he did it, But when administration was not there, Monday through Friday, administration was there. After 5 o'clock or whatever, and on weekends and nights and that kind of stuff, the director of nursing is the hospital administration at that point, If something comes up, she takes care of it. If you have something, you go through, you go through the director of nursing. And they're pretty, for big hospitals especially, those nurses have been around a while, they're pretty sharp, and they know, they make mistakes. But what he should have done, well, he should have done nothing, because it didn't snow. But if he had something, he should have gone through, the director of nursing, said, here, blah, blah, blah. Like I did one time, we had a tornado that, it was a Saturday or Sunday, and I was working at Trinity Lutheran Hospital, and a tornado set down in the southern part of Kansas City area, heading for Baptist Hospital, heading for Research Medical Center, heading for St. Luke's Hospital, heading for, I think we were like set down, the thing, the news reporting it had shut, the tornado had set down, heading for Trinity Lutheran Hospital, and then right behind us was St. Mary's Hospital. Right behind us. There was a street and then St. Mary's Hospital. Anyway, I was, from the time I was in high school, I was in the Ground Observer Corps, the Weather Observers, Civil Defense, on and on and on and on. Anyway, I was in the Ground Observer Corps. We watched for, when I was in high school, we watched for enemy aircraft, Russian bombers over Kansas City. Never happened. And then when the Air Force did away with the Ground Observer Corps, we were trained as weather observers. And we were weather observers. And they said the first trained weather observers, which I find hard to believe. Maybe the first weather observers in Kansas City, Missouri. I don't know. Anyway, that's what we were told. But anyway, so, and then as hospital security, at all the hospitals that I worked at, we were the ones who took the tapes around or whatever and made sure that all the employees saw the tornado warning and what to do. Here's what all employees had to sit through it and be signed off, and that type of stuff. And but anyway, I'm working at Trinity, and news reports, on the TV. I call the director of nursing, who was working then because administration wasn't there. And I said, you know, a tornado just set down at such and such, and it's heading for such and such a hospital and such a hospital, and it's heading in this direction, or I forget exactly, you know. And I said, we need to go into code gray. No, I don't want to do that. If we go into code gray, she said, we would have to announce it down. Then later, when the code gray was over, we'd have to announce it over the public address system. It would wake up the employees, or wake up, not the employees, wake up the patients. And I said, you know, no, but you know, we do need to do that. It's heading this, you know, it's heading this way. It's set down. It's set down. You know, no, we're not going to do it. And I said, please, it's, you know, really important. I think we do this. No, I said, okay, you're the boss. Next day in the newspaper, each one of the hospitals, you know, Baptist, Research Medical Center, St. Luke's, not us, St. Mary's behind us. Everyone, it was in the paper, on the news. All of the hospitals had gone into their emergency procedures, but not us. Well, of course, it didn't hit any hospital, so. But, you know, you're probably lucky. I got sidetracked, and I've forgotten now which story I was telling. So I guess I can end this. Oh my gosh, I gotta go to the bathroom. I need some Coke in me. I need to take my medicine for the 15th because it's the 16th. I need to take my night medicine. Anyway, thank you very much for watching.